I have people that cause lawsuits in my company all the time. And I used to call meetings all the time. And for me, it was not about the mistake and someone doing something that caused such a terrible blow to the business. Make sure you don't repeat it. Make sure you learn from it. Make sure that you own it. So from the perspective of that employee, own it. Take responsibility. 100%. Don't lie. Don't sugarcoat it. Step up. Hopefully that doesn't make you lose your job when you do that, because sometimes someone's got to take the bow and arrow.
So I and my team, but mostly me, just destroyed a $100,000 piece of machinery today. CEO of the company wants to have a meeting tomorrow with all of us. What should I expect going into this? What should I do to prepare?
Oh boy. Okay. Whose perspective do you want me to take first?
Let's take the employer's perspective first.
Okay. Good sign that he wants to have a meeting.
Okay.
Because some employers would just fire. They would react. They would do a lot of things other than call for a meeting the next day. That tells me that that person is cooling down, researching, trying to understand what's going on, wants to hear from their team, or he's ready to lay, or she is ready to lay into him. Either way, I think the fact that someone didn't react immediately upon the mistake happening, people didn't get let go or fired, or this person didn't get fired right away. I think, just again, not knowing anything about it, it's probably a leader who's gonna be a little bit more methodical about trying to understand what happened, and depending on if they're an angry person or not, lash out or talk to the team about it, which is what the employer should do. Again, I have no context of the situation. I can tell you myself, I have people that cause lawsuits in my company all the time. And I used to call meetings all the time, and people were scared. And I couldn't believe that after so many years, they were still being so scared, because I always did the same thing. I always did the same thing. I was like, what can we learn from this? Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. And for me, it was not about the mistake and someone doing something that caused such a terrible blow to the business. It was, make sure you don't repeat it. Make sure you learn from it. Make sure that you own it. So from the perspective of that employee, own it. Take responsibility. 100%. Don't lie. Don't sugarcoat it. Step up. And hopefully that doesn't make you lose your job when you do that, because sometimes someone's got to take the bow and arrow, right? But I have to tell you, like, just for me, this is just my own philosophy. You know, the problem with asking me a question about employers is I think different than a lot of people, and I actually don't like doing what everyone else does. So that's kind of my philosophy is. But just like that, from a employee's perspective, everyone's trying to pass the buck. Everybody's trying to point the finger. Nobody wants to own it, because, you know, they don't want to look bad. They don't look. You actually look good. You actually look good when you own it, and you're showing that you're responsible. And responsibility was my number one core value at my company forever. And I took responsibility for everything I was involved in, and sometimes even stuff I wasn't involved in. And I delivered good news just as much as I delivered hard news. And I think you got to be that way if you're an employee and you cause a blunder like that for $100,000. Hopefully it's not just you, it was the team. But guarantee you step up and you own it. You may piss him off, but you'll get respect. And if you don't, because you're not guaranteed, who knows how this person's going to react. But the fallout by not owning it, by not being responsible, is when that person goes home and they're talking to their spouse over dinner, they're not saying good things. They're saying that nobody owns, every leader feels they're alone. Every entrepreneur feels they're by themselves on an island. When they walk into a room, everybody shuts down. The whole mood changes. I used to drive me crazy. I worked years to try to break down that. It doesn't matter. If you're paying people, people treat you differently. And that's just how it is. So I think there is a sort of due diligence that you have a responsibility to give back. And one thing you can do as an employee to give back is own it, be responsible, and don't sugarcoat it, and just tell people what they need to hear, and don't spin it. Don't spin it, and don't point the finger. I think that's a good lesson to learn. Hopefully that.
Did you always used to be that way? in from the employer's perspective in your meetings when you would call those meetings when someone caused a lawsuit, or did it take you a while to learn to, not blow up, not react right away, and
You
kind of
know,
structure things in the way that you did?
I have I call it the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is when you don't remember what it was like before a certain time because you just had been a certain way. So I don't even remember what I was like before I started to really kind of grow into my entrepreneurship kind of journey, like as a mature leader. I started when I was 21 years old, and I made a lot of mistakes. Um, I've always been hypersensitive to my staff. My level of empathy is heightened, so I try to make sure that I don't scare people. And I certainly don't try to. I was always told how intimidating I am because, like in an interview, I'm like interrogating in a way because I'm like really trying to get to know you. And the way I ask, it's very blunt and very direct. And sometimes I can really scare people. I mean, people would sit in my office and they'd like blotch up. And I'm like, geez, like I didn't say anything, but like they're not used to someone just kind of like being so direct like I am. Um, there was plenty of times where I was upset and they knew I was upset, but I was what you call a master repairman. That was my second job. I repaired very well. So if I tweaked you in a meeting and you knew I was talking about whatever I was talking about and it was being directed at you, but I was being indirect to the entire company because I didn't want to embarrass you, and I knew you were crawling in your skin, I repaired. I would come to you later and say, hey, can we talk? And I would make good on that. And I think great leaders, they can tap in and be attuned into like how you make people feel. And I got to tell you, when you have a room full of employees, that's very difficult to do because most people in the room are thinking one thing, and then a minority of the people are thinking another thing. And so that's why I think being vulnerable and transparent as a leader is a great quality to have, but it could also get you in a lot of trouble. So yeah, there were plenty of times where I think early on I would show my emotion. I'd wear my heart on my sleeve, but it was always for the greater good of the company. And if I scared someone, I always repaired. I always tried to repair.